With the current downturn to CSGO's popularity, people are speculating about why this is, and what could be done about it. And an interesting suggestion was brought up the other day. Would CSGO benefit from shorter matches? Instead of there being 15 rounds per side, what if it was shortened to, say, 12? This would result in less variation to the length of matches. Each round played would become more meaningful, and we'd be able to watch more games before burnout kicked in, possibly. Shortening matches sounds like a simple suggestion, but it would have far-reaching consequences to every aspect of the game. For instance, the game's balance and economy is geared towards a 15-round side. The game has received countless updates and adjustments to get it to where it is. The impact the pistol round at the start of each half should have has long been debated and tweaked. You want for the winner to get an advantage, but not so much of one that it dictates the entire half of that game. This balance has been finely tuned, and so altering the length of a half would plunge this balance into chaos. With fewer rounds before the halftime reset, it could alter when teams would save or when they'd force. It would shake things like that up, and would force teams to devise new strategies. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. All this time, we've assumed updates to the game's balance have helped to improve it, as though we're zeroing in on perfection, one step at a time. But maybe doing this has made the game too safe, too predictable, too boring. And if not for the players, then maybe for the viewers. Dropping the number of rounds from 15 to 12 is just one way of changing things. We could also try shortening the rounds, which, among other things, would guarantee that Na'Vi leaves it too late every time before rushing B. C4 currently takes 40 seconds to explode, so what if it was cut down to 35 seconds? But we've got to be careful with this. Glaive made the important point that some bits shouldn't be cut back on, such as the freeze time for players. Or at least I think that's what Glaive was getting at. Some of that article's translations were a bit questionable. But from my perspective, I don't want those 15 or 20 seconds of freeze time every round. It doesn't take 15 seconds for me to buy a weapon in matchmaking, and it's not like my teammates are using that time to discuss anything important. And when viewing pro games, it's the least exciting bit to watch. But obviously for the pros themselves, it's very important that they have that time to recover and to plan their next move. So Glaive doesn't want that bit cut back on, but he still thinks that games are too long and that something has to be done about it. I understand why he's hesitant to propose actual changes. When you're at the top of your game, the last thing you want is for the rules to change. But it can't be easy on players either, especially when they're expected to play 2 best-of-3s on the same day, and when both of those end up going into overtime. Sure, reducing the length of a best-of-3 would help with this, but you know what would be even better? It's if we knew how long a match would take with some degree of certainty. Because that's another problem I see with how the matches are currently being played. They can vary in length so greatly. There are some sports where the length of a match is more fixed. Football, for instance. You have a 90-minute match, and if it's still a draw at that point, then you move to a shorter overtime period. Then if, after that, a winner still isn't decided, people take in turns to kick balls at the goalies until one of them is left standing. At least I think that's how it works. But compare that with CSGO. It's first to 16 rounds, so already the length of the game can vary immensely, ranging between 16 and 30 rounds in length, and then possible overtime on top of that. And this variance is compounded in a best-of-3, or, God forbid, a best-of-5. Even supposedly exciting grand finals can drag on when it reaches the 4th map and still shows no sign of ending. You obviously want both teams to have a chance to prove themselves, but you don't want them to have 100. It's funny because I used to prefer the way that one team in CSGO is guaranteed to win a round every few minutes. I thought it was better than football's potential to go on for 90 minutes without a single goal being scored. And if anything, the way CSGO goes about it could lead to shorter matches if the balance of power is continually changing with every round. But now I'm seeing the flip side of that. When games are so variable in length, it adds uncertainty. Tournaments need to allocate times for every game that's going to be played, but when the length of games is so variable, it could mean that one ends early and people are sat around waiting for ages before the next one begins. Or that match could carry on into the 4th overtime, delaying the next match or resulting in everybody being kicked out of the arena because it's reached closing time, or because they've got to catch the last train. You can't plan for stuff when a match can vary between 2 and 5 hours in length. And will sponsors be left satisfied with fewer ad breaks if one team continually steamrolls the other, cutting a game short? When it comes to making these videos, I sit in front of a Word document typing random stuff for 3 to 4 hours, which eventually gets condensed down into a coherent script, which I then check through Reddit to make sure I haven't missed anything that the community has suggested. Turns out everything I've suggested so far has already been proposed by people there, right down to my joke about Na'Vi and football. But at least I know I'm in sync with how the community sees the current state of the game. But props to Johnson95, who proposed something I hadn't thought of, which was a best-of-2 format plus overtime. In other words, instead of a full 3 maps being played, if after 2 it's still a draw, then it goes into short, frantic overtimes on a 3rd map, which normally sees 3 rounds being played before the teams swap. Repeat until we have a winner. This would be shorter than a full best of 3, and it ups the stakes by concluding the game in a more frantic, fast-paced manner compared with the rest of it, which would be well worth sticking around to see. But here's another crazy thought, and one that I don't think has been posted on Reddit yet. What if, instead of being the first team to reach a certain score, a CSGO match was made to be a fixed length, with the teams changing over at the half-time mark? Would it lead to unwanted behaviours like the winning team camping in a corner or wasting time? Or could that be countered by shortening the round length and by adding a time bonus for simply reaching the objectives? Perhaps more importantly, would this be more or less exciting than what we have now? You can shoot down new ideas, but now is not the time for caution. The game's tried that, and it isn't working anymore. There doesn't have to be anything wrong with the game for change to be desirable. It's just got a bit stale in its current state. So perhaps it's time to shake things up for CSGO, just for the sake of it. Let's start by dropping the length of the halves down from 15 to 12 rounds. And if it's a draw after all that, we'll have the winner decided on FY Iceworld. Or maybe in penalty shootouts, last goalie standing.